Hey, Ken, I am very, very excited to chat with you today. I feel like every time you and I hop on a call, we could probably hop on a call for hours because you have wonderful stories and I love learning about you. But for everyone who hasn't had the opportunity to meet you, and we're going to dive into who you are and how you got there, but what do you do now in your life?
That's good. What don't I do? Oh, geez. Yeah. So just a little back history of myself. I'm the co-owner of Crossroads Brewing Company. We opened our first location back in 2008, 2009, and that was a brew pub with an 80-seat restaurant. And then in 16, 17, we opened up a production facility in Catskill. And at that facility, we also have a tap room, and we distribute throughout New York State. We do Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So we also contract brew for a bunch of other breweries as well. So it's been an interesting last 2 years, to say the least. But we're all good, man. Everything's good. We're
It has.
happy.
And you're in upstate New York, one of my favorite places in the country. I hope you and I actually get to meet face to face at some point before too long, because I would love an adventure up that way.
Yeah,
But
man.
it's so funny thinking about the past 2 years in craft beer because, 9,000 breweries, that's a lot of breweries. But at the same time, our community still is so small and people know the same people. Just before you and I hopped in this call, who are you talking to?
Oh, right. Yeah. So I had a really cool conversation with Damian Dobbs yesterday out of Tough Dog Brewery at San Antonio, Texas. And, he's a brewery in planning. So we were just shooting the shit on the call and, bouncing some things off of each other. And I was just trying to give him some insights and some advice on what to and what not to do, or at least what worked well for me and what didn't for me personally when I was opening my place, and just, creating that relationship and that connection. And, it's just great. And you'll find that in this industry across the country. We were talking about Jason, right? Met Jason kind of like through LinkedIn, and we're common friends, and he mentioned you, and he's going to be in St. Louis. And then I started talking to him, and he put me in contact with the guys from Big Storm, and I reached out to the guys from Big Storm in Florida, and they put me in contact with somebody in New Jersey doing distro. So it was like, we're moving chess pieces all around the board, and it's just so freaking cool, man.
And it's such a small world, because to go back to Damien with Tough Dog Brewing, 2 years ago, I was in Richmond for the Craft Beer and Brewing Accelerate workshop. And this is like right before the pandemic hit. Like, we were just comfortable enough to shake hands, but nervous enough to kind of be like, should we have done that after we did it? So I met Damien as well at this event. And when you mentioned Tough Dog, I knew the name rang a bell. I searched him on my inbox. Sure enough, him and I had a few emails literally March 9th, 2020. And you're mentioning you connected with him. You connected him with Jason Sleeman, who's a great, craft beer finance person. It's such a small world, and it all comes together because I think we're all dedicated to helping one another.
Yeah, man. Oh, and of course, we all have the same passion. It's, it's over a pint of beer. The best social lubricant there possibly could be, right?
100%. Well, now let's back up a ton. Let's learn how that pint of beer got in your life in the first place. So I really want to start early on. Kenny, if you and I had met when you were just a kid, I know you're maybe a couple years older than me, but we'll just pretend for a sec. But let's say you and I met on the playground. And
just a couple right there.
A couple. And I had said, hey, Kenny, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have told me back then?
Back then, God. Oof. Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I was
and
always
every kid had that dream. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be the president of the United States. I want to do X, Y, Z.
I think I wanted to be at that point. I wanted to be an athlete. I think I really had a passion for football. I played football my whole life. I never actually. It kind of deteriorated because I moved around a little bit, and then wound up at a school, a high school that didn't have a football program. So I wound up playing for like the Pop Warner division, but. I also had a interesting upbringing too. I was on my own very early, and I started in the drywall industry at like 14 years old. I learned the value of a dollar very quickly, as well as a really important work ethic, and that kind of carried me through my high school.
So how did you end up in drywall? Did you have someone in your life who was a drywall contractor, or how did that come about?
Yeah, basically my entire family was in the industry. I learned from my late uncle, who worked for my father, who back then, I mean, this is going back a long time ago. You're talking, this is 40 years, possibly 35, 40 years. Had a big drywall company in Manhattan, and I was living in Queens at the time, and I also, not only did I learn a trade, but I also learned to navigate the world from a young kid's perspective, right? Getting on the trains, riding the trains at a very young age, learning my way around the city. Times were different back then, obviously. Nobody would let their kid at 9 years old, 10 years old, ride the 7 train into the city, right? But, that also taught me a trade, which I, believe it or not, I still utilize today. So that was a great thing. It taught me the great work ethic, also the value of a dollar, which, carried me through my high school years. Eventually jumped into the drywall union, when I was about 18, 19 years old. And what happened there was I rose the ranks very quickly because I was already experienced at that age. I already knew the trade. Now I just had to learn the business. By the time I was 20, 21 years old, I was already making top dollar. I was already a foreman, probably youngest in the union. And of course, the next best thing was to jump into my own business, which I got out of the union. I created KL Drywall, and started my own drywall sheetrocking company. And had at the height, we had about 45 men working for us, and we were basically the drywall company on Long Island and Queens, the go-to company. Like we were pretty big at that time. But the lesson I learned there is, and I still carry it with me today. I always told my guys, this is, people are going to be able to do it faster and cheaper, always. But the only thing that we can hang on to is we got to do it better. If we can always maintain the consistent quality, we're always going to be busy. We're always going to have work. And I still have that mindset now, even in the beer business, But I ran that company until KL Drywall was in existence, until I was like, I guess I made the turn to like 40 years old, 45. At 40 years old, I started getting the bug to get out, right? My son was going off to college. I said, okay, I've been doing this for a long time. It's physical. What am I going to do for the future? My family's scattered all about. There's really no reason for me to stay in Queens of Long Island anymore if I wanted to relocate. And so I started dabbling in the beer industry. And,
we're going to go into your beer industry and how you got there shortly. But I do want to back up to when you were 14. I mean, not a lot of kids, especially these days, want to work hard as a young person. And, I was a lot like you when I was 16. I mean, I'm assuming I'm a lot like you. I think your story, the work ethic, it definitely resonates with me.
Sure.
I wanted to have a car. I wanted to have my own money I could spend on things. I wanted to be able to go out and spend money on Friday night with my friends, whether we're having a milkshake or going to IHOP and having pancakes, just something silly like that. It's the responsibility that instills in you at an early age that you carry through life. And when I was just a kid, I started selling snow cones at a local baseball stadium. And I worked for commission. So if I only sold one snow cone, I'm making next to nothing. But if I go out there and I hustle for 3 hours during a baseball game, I made more than almost anyone my age. And it was really motivating me to have that hard work and the paycheck that came with it. But for you at 14, what motivated you to want to work that hard?
Well, it goes even back before that. I came, like I said, I had a tough upbringing, came from a broken home. My family, mother and father were split up, and that whole thing was a mess. Not any different than a lot of families today, right? But I can remember walking in, going back to my football dream, seeing an ad in a newspaper and reading it to my mom. Football, Pop Warner, blah blah blah. I think I was 9 years old. $115 to join, and she looked at me and she said, "We don't have that." I said, "Well, I want to play," and she said, "Well, get a job."
So what did you do?
I got a paper route, and I ran a paper route on my bicycle, and I raised enough money to join and play. And I continued doing that. And that was the beginning of wow, I can make money. And then, moving into the drywall industry, I think walking around, like I said, I was on my own from a very early age. So having a pocket full of money, or just the idea, knowing that I could generate money and income at any time, because I did have a trade behind me at this point, was very, very confidence building. I now didn't really have to rely on anyone else. I rely on myself, right? I got my first appointment when I was 17 years old, so I hate to say that, because today I'm not a money driven person, right? But I will say that back then, at that age, I was one of the few kids at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old that always had money, but I always worked. I worked Saturdays and Sundays, and when my friends were going out to parties, I was working after school. I mean, when I was in 8th grade, I literally taped, 9th grade, I taped my principal's office in return for not getting suspended, but we don't want to go down that line, all right? But, so I was doing things like that, and being self-sufficient and having money in your pocket. It also created some other problems too.
Well, it's tough to be that self-motivated so early. I mean, it sounds like you did a lot out of need, but were you surrounding yourself with other people who were encouraging you to work hard, encouraging you to have these jobs, encouraging you to think about having your own drywall company someday?
When I look back, these are good questions, and not many people ask me these things. I don't think I was like, my mindset wasn't there. It was more just like, look, back then times were different, right? The drinking age was 18. My friends, we were all 16, 15, 16. We were all drinking beer. We were getting into, things we shouldn't have been gotten into. That's why I say it was also detrimental to have a pocket full of money, because that allowed me to get into things that I shouldn't have gotten into, but it also, I was one of the few that was disciplined enough to get out of that rut, where a lot of my friends didn't. And I'm always grateful that I at least had that discipline behind me to be able to see that, like, sure, this is great, but this is also a privilege, and I have to also be able to manage. And that's why I kind of am empathetic with these college kids who go into sports and they're making tons and tons of money. People should be learned. They need to be taught how to manage their money, because all of a sudden, it opens up so many doors, but half of them are possibly the wrong doors, and I found that out early. But a lot of the things that happened to me in those years, I'm that same person, in my late 50s now. And, I'm not ashamed to say that those were things that taught me values and instilled things. Like my mom had me when she was 18 years old. My mother had 3 kids by the time she was 23 years old.
Wow.
I have kids that work for me in a restaurant now that are 21, 22. I look at them. They could barely tie their shoes. Could you imagine having 3 kids? It's like, holy crap, man. So it was a different time. It was a different place.
You were forced to grow up quick, it sounds like.
Yes, very quickly. I had no choice.
I mean, working so early, did you always like being your own boss, or were you ever happy working for someone else?
No, I was never happy. I think I did 2 weeks at a supermarket, and I remember, the boss telling me one time to do something, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. But again, going back to some of the values they created, like I said earlier, I was never a money-driven guy, right? So the only thing, and this is to your point and your question, the only reason I continued to run my drywall company, in my late 20s is, I had my son when I was 27 years old, and what the running my own business did for me is it gave me the freedom. I wasn't making a lot of money, and I didn't care about it. I just wanted to make sure, because of my upbringing, right? I didn't really have much guidance. So obviously, what do I want to do? Make it better for my kid, So I was able to be at every single game. I was able to, drop him pre-K. I dropped him off at pre-K. I made his lunch. I picked him up. I went to his games. I never missed anything.
And you did it because you wanted to be there.
Right. Because, that was more important to me. The money was the money. I would sacrifice it and, whatever. And if I had to leave at 3:30 to go to a game, I didn't have to say, hey, can I leave at 3:30? It's the only, to anyone. I have to answer anyone. That was the only reason I ran my business for as long as I did, but, and it turned out because I'm actually friends with my son. It's better. It's more than I could say than the relationship I have with my father, So, but that was the most important thing, staying in the business, and again, taught me a trade. And look, it could have been way worse. A lot of people have it way worse. You know, I was given an opportunity, and I took advantage of being given an opportunity, which I wish a lot more kids and people would do today. You know, opportunities are there. What you do with those opportunities is up to you. We can only give them to you, right? We can't force you to do anything.
And so often it's about awareness. It sounds like you were lucky enough to be surrounded by a family who was already in the drywall space. But you know, I think it's important for people to find what interests you, because, you know, we're not always born to be the next great athlete, but, you know, you can find those skills and those things you enjoy that you can somehow, you know, find a way through.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
so working for yourself, though, which seems to be what you love doing, you know, how did you learn the skills to become good enough at what you do, to become as well known as you were in the Long Island area as the drywall company people went to?
I just had that mindset. I was like, look, you know, we got to be the best. We got to do it the best. And I just always, that was my mantra every day. I was like, look, there were many companies out there that could do it cheaper and faster than us. But when I found that niche, when I said that we're going to do things that a drywall company has never done before on the job site, do specific things that other companies don't do, that's going to separate us from the other ones and make us better. That's when it started to elevate. And then what happened as I was quality orientated, as we continued getting more and more notice, I realized that the people now that I was associating myself with were like higher end builders and higher end architects and higher end designers, right? And then as I continued to grow up the ladder in a quality minded business, I saw like the competition would start to trickle, you know. So, and what I mean by that, like you know, if we were doing an ordinary job, there would be 10 companies that would bid on that job. But if we were doing a high end job that needed specific attention to quality detail, there'd be maybe 3 companies that were capable of doing it. And then eventually it just became me. And then it was like, no, this is the only guy that you want to use. If you want this shit to come out right, you use this guy.
So I swear we're going to talk about beer eventually, but I love learning from people in other industries. So I really want to focus on the drywall aspect of your life right now. I mean, you talked about how you wanted to differentiate your company from the others, and you provided like a different level of service. You know, could you give a couple of examples of what you all did to separate yourselves?
Absolutely. I mean, I work for a high-end kitchen company. When I'm talking about like the kitchen renovations were no less than $250,000. So when people were paying that kind of money back then, and even now, it's still an astonishing amount of money, they demanded nothing less than perfection. So what we would do is, in a lot of these old homes, we would go in and instead of then gutting everything completely down, ripping studs, and we would go in and we would power plane. We would literally square up the studs. We would square up all of the corners where any of the cabinetry would come together, right, to form a corner, perfect corner. Anywhere where tile would come together, any of the bathrooms. We would make sure
that in my home for sure. I have a 100-year home, and it's really uneven in some places.
So I developed a system at that point in time. Metal studs were a big thing that we were using, right? So I would go into the bathrooms, and instead of like I see guys doing it today, like they're shimming out this and shimming out that and making sure it's all even. What I used to do is I would take metal studs, I would sister them next to the wood studs, I would get my level point, and then I would screw in one side, and then I would like literally take that stud, move it in and out, and screw it in, and create a new wall within the wall. And for ceilings, the old plaster ceilings, we used to use resilient channel. Which was self-leveling because the ceilings you wanted perfectly level. We use lasers to set our corner beads, and inside, outside corners we use lasers on. And sure, it took a lot more time. Like I had a crew that specifically went into these homes and prepped first before my sheetrock crew went in, and then the taping crew went in, right? So we differentiate ourselves by doing specific things like that.
No, as you grew this company, had you ever managed people before?
Oh no.
So how did that, tell me about that experience? You know, when you first started realizing you were popular enough to get these jobs, and you're like, oh man, now I have to hire, now I have to manage, now I have to run an actual business that's more than just me.
Yeah. Well, I always made sure that I would never ask any of my people to do anything that I wouldn't do. And the way I ran my company, it was very consistent. I believe in consistency across the board. Without consistency, it's over, right? And showing up is 90% of life, right? If you don't show up, but I ran it the same every day. It was, 5:30 in the morning. I was in my office. I would leave my office at 7:00. I would go to the job. I was physically there with my crew. Like, I was on the job. Like, you see these guys walking around, like you see, we didn't have any cell phones or anything like that to keep up with you. I mean, I'm always astonished. Like, even when I drive by, like the road crews working out there, there's one guy working and 10 guys standing around. I was just like, man, that wouldn't fly back in my day. Like, we were all being productive, and I was being productive there with them, right? I was always the first guy on the job. I would never let any of my guys beat me to the job, unless there was a reason or I had to be somewhere else. If we were managed, so I ran it like that, and I trained a lot of guys. I brought in people that I knew had the potential to do it, and they were willing to learn, and I was willing to teach them. I probably taught 150 people in 35 years to tape, but I taught them my way, and I taught them the right way. And I didn't look, you could teach repetition all day long, but what I taught was like, this is how you do it, but you can't do it unless you know why you do it that way. This is why you do it that way. I could easily take it someone and say, this is how you do it, go at it. And he would probably just do it that way every single day. And if somebody walked up to him and said, well, why do you do it like that? And he would go, I don't know. This is how I was taught, just to do it this way. So there was a how and a why. And I had specific things that I wanted done that I knew that worked. And I was always open for ideas too, though. I mean, if any of my guys would say, hey, man, we could do it this way or that way. Hey, man, let's do it. Door open policy, right? We're all here together. Our ultimate goal here is to create, finance and make money and take care of our families. And I'm proud to say that a good portion of my guys that worked for my company back then, 12 years, 15 years, they stuck with me, 19 years.
You beat me to that question, because everything you're talking about right now, just the communication with your team, the education, you getting down and dirty with them, that's motivating them. And I was going to follow up and ask, it sounded like you had incredible retention because people really enjoyed working with you.
Yeah. I mean, I watched. It's so funny, you want to talk about when you really feel old, when one of your main guys says, oh, I just had a baby. And then all of a sudden, like 2 days go by and he's like, yeah, my son's 18th birthday is now. I'm like, wait a minute. It was only 2 days ago you had this kid, It's like, where did that go? But it was like, it was time went by so quick. And I watched them raise families, and I watched them purchase homes and pay their mortgages off. And, I'm happy and proud to say that, I was part of that. And sure, there were people that came through that just, they didn't stay long. And I always said, look, if you can work for us, and my core of guys that we all had the same core values and core beliefs, there was something, again, going back to opportunity. Here's an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you, right? And any of the people, I never would fault the guy who would come to me and say, hey, listen, I'm going to go on my own, or I'm going to try and make more money. How could you ever fault somebody for doing that, right? You can't.
You want to be proud of them because you've taught them skills, you gave them the means to succeed.
Listen, I had 5 guys that I could name off the top of my head right now that went off into their own businesses with my blessing. Okay, absolutely. I taught them the business. I taught them how to tape, and went off in their own businesses. And a year down the line, I get a call. Hey, Ken, I bit off a little more than I could chew. Can you come and help me? And vice versa. I got an extra job. You want to do it? I would give it to these guys. So we created an incredible network of people within the drywall industry where I could just say, I can't do it, but I'll give you this guy. I can't do it, and vice versa. And if anybody ever needed help, hey, I'm in a jam. I need to get this job done by Sunday. Can you come in with 5 guys? Let's go, guys. So it was always like that back then. But everybody, you give everybody choices, right? You got to make choices. And give them the opportunity, let them make the choice, and see how they handle it. The guys who handled themselves with integrity, I still talk to. The ones that didn't, I don't. And that's just, and it's the same in my business now. And it's the same way. People come and people go for right reasons and wrong reasons.
And you want to find those who align with your values, or those are the ones who stick around.
Of course, and you also want to, you want to be able to at least see potential in people and say, okay, like I said before, showing up is 90%. If I can get someone to show up every day, I can teach them. You know, if you don't show up, you're not doing any of
It
this.
sounds like there's oddly a lot of similarities between your drywall business and the brew pubs you run today. But, you know, before we get there, I'm going to give you two questions back to back right now. You know, at what point did beer or craft beer become a part of your life? And at what point did you realize you didn't want to spend your life in drywall anymore?
It was probably like I said, when my son was heading off to college, I guess, let's see, 10 years. It was about, I'm saying once I hit like 40, between 40 and 45, I just, it was kind of like a combination of everything. I was at the point where I was doing that business for a long time. I knew it in and out. I knew there was more for me out there. I wanted to make a difference somehow, some way, you know, in an industry that I started to really gravitate to. And so if you think about it, back then, like one of the first beers that I drank, I never forget it. I was out at Montauk Point, and it was a Father's Day weekend, and we were watching golf. I forget what tournament it was, and went into the store and picked up a 6-pack of Pete's Wicked Ale. And I sat down and I tried, and I was like, and here, you know, this is coming from someone who was always, look, I always wanted to try different things. So I wasn't the guy who would go in there and buy mainstream beer, ever. We didn't have many choices. So I was either a St. Pauli's girl, a Spaten, maybe Heineken a little bit, Molson a little bit. Those were the big beers that you bought. And all of a sudden you go in and you see Pete's Wicked Ale. What the hell is this crap?
What made you buy it? Was it the name? Was it the bottle? What
it was
about
just
it
the allure of all of it. I had never seen it before. The name was great, I thought. The bottle was great. And Summer Blonde just sounded fantastic. Sat down on the you know, beach or the couch, whatever it was, and took a couple of sips of it. And I was like, holy shit, man, this is different. This is great. And then from then on in, anything so-called craft, I just went after. And then, you know, and I think the next big one was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. It was one of the first, and then Lagunitas, and then they started to trickle in. But I mean, I drank so much Pete's Wicked Ale that from my beer distributor, the guy that I used to go in my corner Home D, he ordered me a giant Pete's Wicked Ale mirror. And I wish I had that today, but I gave it away. But, you know, I was proud of that. It was just great, you know, and then it was getting people turned on to the beer scene, you know, one beer at a time. But it was funny. I continued to run my drywall business even while I started to get into the beer business, you know, and I did it with another brewery on Long Island. I was instrumental in getting one of their core brands out into the marketplace before anybody knew anything about craft beer.
So did you slowly start working in the craft beer industry because you were growing frustratedly in the drywall side of things?
I mean, I wasn't so much frustrated with it. I just knew that it was time to move on. There wasn't really much more I needed to accomplish. I knew that time, you know, the physical aspect of what I was doing was going to take its toll on my body. And, you know, the allure of just starting a home brew in my friend's garage. And this was the shit. This was going on. This is what we had fun. Like when people were out there, we would chip in to get, you know, yeast and malt, we would scrounge pennies, you know, everybody would chip in and we would, you know, that's how we did it. But I got into the industry working for that brewery. I don't want to say working. I never got paid a dime. I did it because I wanted to get into the business. So what I used to do was I would plan my days when I was doing drywall. I would have pallets of beer sent to my garage in my house in Queens. I would take the beer, I would put it in my van, and then I would plan out wherever I was working, whatever town Long Island was, I would stop on my way home to these Home Ds and I would sell beer filled with compound and filled with dust. And I would walk in and I would say, I'm here to sell you this brand. And from then on in, it just grew. And when I tell you, man, back then, how many no's? It was no, get out. Like, are you kidding me? We're not buying that beer. Like, get out. And I said, And then it was just became like, yeah, I'm going to sell this guy. Like, this guy's going to buy my beer. And eventually, like on the 11th time I went into a store, he bought it. And I grew that brand to 50, 60 accounts where I could no longer handle it myself. And then started soliciting distributors, because that was the owner's next vision. He wanted to distribute his beer.
Did anybody train you how to sell beer? I know through your past career, you knew how to sell yourself.
Yeah.
But how did you learn selling beer on the fly?
Hey, listen, it's the same exact thing, man. I tell people today, I don't care if you're selling sheetrock. I don't care if you're selling paper cups, if you're selling beer, scissors, pens, but it's all the same. It's all the same. You have to be able to identify with that particular, and all I need is something in common. Even if I walked in and I could say, hey, I met your brother's wife's cousin's son's brother at this thing, and we're both Jet fans. Boom. That was it. That's all it took, but you need to pay attention and listen, and become a better listener than anything else, because you wanted to pick up that one or two like things that person, whatever it was, and then use that the next time you come in and just say, hey, I noticed you're a Cincinnati Bengal fan. Hey, they're in the Super Bowl now. Hey, great, boom. And that was all, that's how it worked. But no, I had to go out. When I started my drywall company, there was no such thing as internet. We barely had phones. Everybody was wearing beepers. There was no, I printed up flyers and I went around and knocked on doors and put it in mailboxes and sold myself, and I said, hey, I'm not going to, again, my motto, I'm sure you're going to get somebody cheaper, and you're going to get somebody who's going to tell you they can do it in 2 days, but nobody's going to do it better than I am. And what value do you put on making one phone call and knowing that your job is going to get done? One phone call, that's it. Opposed to, when is he coming back? When is he coming back? Is he coming back? Well, I gave him some money already. He's not going to come back, so you sell yourself. And it's the same with any product. I don't care what anybody tells me. I'll battle that with any sales guru in the world, because I did it. And I still do it to this day. When I sell the most beer for Crossroads? When I'm excited. When I'm excited about a beer, and they see that excitement, and these people go, holy shit, do you know this company? He's excited about this? It's got to be good. And I sell the shit out of it.
Passion is contagious, Ken. Passion is absolutely contagious.
And that's how it is. But yeah, I mean, no experience in selling beer, but what was good for me, right? So I sold it out of the back of my truck, per se, right? And build up the accounts. Now the owner of the brewery says, I want to distribute. So, okay, distribution. Back in the 90s, to early 2000s, late 1900s, right? 2000. Distribution model. I had no idea. I must have talked to freaking 12, 15 distributors about this and what are you going to do back then. This, every distributor on Long Island and Manhattan, listening to all their spiels and this, and then me getting a gut feeling and saying, okay, this is what we should do. This is what we shouldn't do. And then going back to the owner and saying, hey, here's my report. This, and this, but it's ultimately your decision. What do you want to do? And at that time, he wound up signing a distribution agreement with Union when Union was fairly new, when they were just starting out. So I went from a sales rep, right? And overnight, once the distribution was signed, to a brewery rep, a direct brewery rep. Now, yet another phase of the business I'm learning, right? I'm learning how to represent as a brewery rep. Now I'm going out there and describing and explaining our products and our liquid to other salespeople, right? Within the distribution. This beer is made with these ingredients, that ingredients, the ABVs, the IBUs, and, teaching them that. And back then, there were guys that I met at Union that were just starting out in their early 20s that now have extremely recognizable and very successful distribution companies, and I can remember these guys when they first started. And, but, learning the business from that way kind of in instead of jumping into the brewing aspect of it. I kind of got it in it a little bit different than a lot of people nowadays.
What are some lessons that you learned while trying to sell beer and working as a brewery rep?
Some of the lessons.
Because you knew how to sell yourself, but did you ever go into a situation that didn't come out the way you thought it would, and like, oh man, maybe I should do things a little bit differently next time?
Sure. I mean, it's always that way. Look, I'm a true believer. If you really want something done, you got to do it yourself. And one thing that I really learned is your word is a big deal. And I was always that used to like just if I was selling something and I would make that sale, and then the sale got destroyed or it didn't happen because of someone else, that to me was the biggest letdown. I would always make sure that. So what that taught me is now I had to see the sale all the way through to almost the delivery, right? To make sure that the sales, because once I handed it off to someone else, there was a good possibility that they were going to not follow up on it or not, or under promise, or just outright lie. And that was a big deal for me, because I'm out there selling myself, I'm selling the brewery, and man, I'm going out there and putting my name and my reputation out there on the line. And the last thing I need to do, I always, till this day, I always say, look, if I'm going to fail, it's going to be because of me, not because of someone else. I'm not going to let that happen, and if I fail, I fail, and then I learn. But, the biggest thing was just really being authentic and full transparency. Don't oversell and underdeliver. That doesn't help anyone, just do what you can do and be real. And that's what kind of like grew the business, which you would think that would be an attribute that everybody has, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't. They handle it quite differently. But yeah, and that's kind of how I modeled myself and continue to do it that way when we opened Crossroads.
So, at what point working for the other brewery? What was the brewery's name?
It was Butternuts Beer and Ale.
So at what point did you decide you enjoyed this industry so much you wanted to open up your own tap room? And if I'm not mistaken, you're in Athens. Well, you opened up in Athens, and Athens is not where you were at that time.
No, right? I was still living in Queens.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a challenge in itself too, realizing you wanted to open up your own place at a distance away. So yeah. What was that thought process like?
The thought process was, honestly, we didn't have enough money to do it down in New York City or Long Island at the time. I had a second residence at that time up in Athens, and which I frequented all the time, and so that was kind of like my getaway in my earlier years, right? Which eventually became my permanent residence. But it was really passion. It was just the passion. I would go in, and when I was selling the brand for Butternuts, just the excitement that the conversations, just like you and I are having, right? They would just we would just strike up a conversation over a pint of beer. And I was like, man, people are just getting so excited about just this beer, and we're talking about it. And it goes on and on and on and on, and create friends, and and look, I always liked the bar. I was a bar person. I just enjoy that social atmosphere, and not so much. I'm getting older now, but back then, I mean, it was great. I'd love to go to a bar. Who doesn't love to go to a bar and have a beer and talk about the beer? It's different now, but back then, when craft beer was just starting, like everybody was intrigued. It was just intriguing, and I can honestly say, like back then, Butternuts Beer and Ale, a lot of people. If they want to call me and challenge me on this, I would be more than happy to take the challenge. Butternuts Beer and Ale was the first Northeast, if not nationwide, brewery to put beer in a can. It wasn't Sly Fox. It wasn't Dale's Pale Ale. I know, I was there. And if anybody wants, I know because he had a cask. The line that he had was cask, and he bought the very first cask line out of production. So if anybody wants to give me a ring and challenge that, I'll be more than happy to take that
So
challenge.
I'll challenge you right now, Ken, because I'm in Richmond. Well, I'm not in Richmond, Virginia. I'm in Norfolk, Virginia, but I have a lot of pride for my home state of Virginia.
Absolutely.
And apparently the news and the historical references say that in 1935, there was the first beer can in Richmond. So
no, I'm talking about craft beer.
Oh, there we go.
Craft
I guess you
beer.
There.
Oh God, if it was the first can, I think I had a can of Peels, Schlitz or Peels back then with the pull top. No, I'm talking about craft beer.
I was a little wrong in the context. You got me there.
Yeah, with definitely craft beer, because everybody's like, yeah, Dale's Pale Ale and Sly Fox and all of those. And listen, if he wasn't the first one, he was definitely in the top 5 for sure. Way ahead of the curve, way ahead. So just going out there and be able to sell that whole thing. And I realized at that time, I'm like, this is something I want to get into. And it wasn't, again, I'm not a money driven person. It was not for it. I never sat there and said, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm going to become a millionaire. No, I did it for the passion of it. I was intrigued. It was intriguing back then. It was just like, holy shit, there's craft beer. And I learned the industry for 6 years for free. Okay. I never made a dime. I learned it while running my other business, right? So, people who are jumping into this thing now and they're just going, yeah, I want to open up a brewery and something. I just look at them like, oh, good, man. I'm like, this was my road. I wrote the business plan for Crossroads Brewing Company in 2005. Okay. And
when did you end up opening?
2009.
Wow.
And that business plan got ripped up and thrown away and destroyed and, revamped and changed. And, I honestly can tell you, I looked at 100 properties before I found Crossroads, the home for Crossroads. I lost money because of the climate, financial climate we were in, the way shit was going. I worked my ass off. For the first year we bought the building. We worked at 80 hours a week, every week, to build it, to build the brewery. Nobody, look, when I left Long Island, right, in 2000 Queens, Long Island, 2000, I moved up here in 2008, there were 6 breweries on Long Island. There's 76 now. Nobody had any idea. I can remember being on the phone with the TTB, sitting in my van for 4 hours, explaining to them what I was going to do in this little historic town of Athens. And they were just like, this hasn't been done yet. Like, I had to change. It's absurd. It was absurd what the hoops we had to jump through, and then renovate a historic building that was built in 1893 on top of all of that. Now you can go out and get a farmer's permit and a farmer's license and farm license and throw a bag of chips in your tap room and you're good to go. Like, it was not that way back then, man. And I'm sure there's plenty of other people who've been doing it just as long and can definitely back me up on that. But it was hard. It was definitely hard. And but we learned.
How scary was it for you to open up that brewery? I mean, you ran your drywall business for 25 years or so, where you were the boss, you knew what you were doing, you were recognized. Now, you had a little bit of industry experience in craft beer, but you hadn't run your own place before. But you decided you wanted to open up this brew pub in Athens. On a scale of 1 to 10, how scared were you to do that?
20.
20. But how did you stay calm and know it was going to be okay? How did you
alcohol?
I don't know if that's the answer. I wanted to hear the answer.
No, I know. I'm thinking back now. It was like there was a lot of alcohol, but listen, I drank a lot of Dogfish Head 60 Minute and Racer 5 was great.
Oh, Racer 5 is a good one. So is everything from Dogfish.
Yeah, Berry Republic, right? It was just great. But oh God, when I finally decided to really dive into it was and look at the investment. And back then, nobody knew what we were doing. It was hard to get financing from banks and whatnot. So I sold everything. I sold my house. I liquidated all my stocks that I had, which wasn't much. Life insurance, everything that I could possibly pull together, maxed out every single credit card that I possibly could get my hands on, and then some. Moved into a little studio apartment down in Queens, and then started working on the building up in Athens. But when we closed, when I closed on the building, I had like, I don't know, a dollar in my bank. So I would say 73 cents might be a little exaggerated, but we had to close on the building that day to get the financing and plus money to live with. But it was absolutely scary in the beginning, not knowing what we were getting into, how it was going to happen. But the thing is like somebody said to me the other day, it was like, it's 12 years ago. Did you think that you were writing a business plan for an actual business that you would be in business this long? And I was just like, no, it never even crossed my mind. Like, oh, what if we actually are successful and we're here in 12 years? Well, that made me think like a lot of the things back then, decisions that were made out of desperation should have been thunk through a little bit longer, because now all of a sudden it's 12 years later and I look back and I go, shit, why did I sign that piece of paper back then? And because it was there was no turning back at one point. I was when they say all in, I was all in. There was no turning back. There was no choice but to succeed, right? You couldn't fail. There were many, many failures along the way on smaller scales, but in the grand scheme of things, it had to be successful.
Well, in launching this business, you had a co-owner as well. So how did you find your co-owner, Gene?
We met down in Queens, and we just had the same passion for doing. She was getting out of an industry that she was in, working, and wanted to do something else, and we kind of crossed paths, and that's kind of like how the name Crossroads came about. It's like Crossroads, Crossroads, like, but it was just weird how it all happened. It was like it never intended to be. It was honestly, that's why the joke is like, yeah, open a brewery, it'll be fun. It was never like, yeah, open a brewery, this is going to be a freaking business for like the next 15 years. It was like, no. Like, who knew? And then when it opened, with the opening of the production facility, it was just like, holy shit, this is real now, But yeah, it's been a lot of work, and we still grind every single day now. The climate of the industry, what we've just went through in the last 2 years, and it's just every day is a learning experience, But,
and looking at the industry in your location, it looks like you're in a fantastically beautiful building. But to open a brewery in a small town 12 years ago, did people look at you like you were crazy, or you knew that there would be demand for not only just the beer, but creating a community space?
Listen, it's probably all of those things, what you just said. Everyone thought I was crazy. I got told no so many times that I think I changed my middle name to No. It's like, no, you can't.
You don't strike me as someone who likes no as an answer either.
No, you can't tell me no. It's no, it can't be done. You can't. What are you doing? You're putting a bar in. You're doing this. You're doing that. But so now it became a mission. Like this is going to happen. I can remember. Even when I was doing drywall, and I had the vision to say I'm going to open up my own brewery someday, and I would tell the builders and guys, and what the response was. Is a typical response. Yeah. Everybody says that. Well, after I actually did it, and it was up and running, I would get calls from the same people who told me I couldn't do it or weren't going to do it. They were just like, you know what, man, you one of the few that actually did it. You changed your life at the age of 45. You sold everything in your life. You uprooted, you moved, and started a new business. Are you out of your freaking mind? I go, yeah, I guess I am. But, the funny part, in the little village, Athens, it's a real sleepy little village. Nobody ever attempted to do anything. Nothing really succeeded for a very long time. And when we came to there with this idea, of course, even at the village level, and they were like, you're going to do what? What is a brew pub? Like, you're going to make the beer? Is it like a bakery? Like, we got everything you could possibly think of under the sun, questions asked. But also, back then, the allure of the beer industry and the brew pub industry was, there was so much opportunity in these little villages to purchase some deteriorating buildings and bring them back to become the crown jewel of the village, and then create a place where people can socialize through beer, right? And I can honestly tell you the pushback that we got in the beginning was very unique for me because I grew up in Queens in a melting pot, right? There was every culture. There was so much culture going on. Living in the city, and I was in the city every weekend. You know, you become friends with all types of people, right? Which is wonderful. Moving just 2 hours north, I realized that to make a difference, it was going to take a little bit more creativity, right? Little did I know in the beginning that there was such segregation as far as just blacks and whites and whether you were gay or, lesbian, whatever the case would be. It was so weird that it was just so frowned upon. Like, oh, people don't socialize in the same buildings. Or if you do, you're sitting on one side and you're sitting on the other. And here I am, this is only 12 years ago. And coming from a place, Queens, I'm like I couldn't comprehend this. So when we opened the doors, it was everyone is welcome. Like everyone belongs in here. Like there is no, you can't come in. I mean, look, if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. You're not coming in. But everyone is welcome. And what that did for the community is it just kind of brought everybody together. And Crossroads literally changed Athens. It really did. At least, I've been told that, and I'm proud to say that we made a difference. We renovated an old historic building, got it back into somewhat working condition, and then we created a social environment where everyone was welcome. I mean, what's better than that, right? And now we're all enjoying beer and talking about beer. One of the greatest things, best things I remember that was said to me, and this might be a little off track a little bit, but there's a local convenience store that's up here, right? It would be considered like the 7-Eleven, right? Everybody knows 7-Eleven where you sold beer. And I remember going in there and getting a cup of coffee, and the manager says to me, he's like, hey, you're that owner of that Crossroads up there, right? And I says, yeah. He goes, well, I don't know if I'm mad at you or if I should congratulate you. I said, why? He said, well, since you opened, our beer sales are down. And I looked in the cabinet, I looked at it, and it was all the macro beers. And I looked at him and I said, I will take that as a compliment. Thank you. And that was the greatest thing. I was like, all right, we made a difference. And until this day, it's still that way. People remember the people who come to the brew pub that, when we first opened, which was a little teeny tasting room. They still come today and they say, we remember what this place was like and what you did for the village. So there's no greater accomplishment than that.
No, that's beautiful. It seems like you truly succeeded in create a welcoming space in Athens. But I have a question for you about those early days, because you weren't from Athens. You moved to Athens, and it does sound like the community welcomed you. But I imagine that could have been challenging at first. This guy from Queens coming into Athens to open up a big old brew pub. What were those early days like, and how did you form relationships that were authentic with the community?
Yeah, it was, well, like I said, I had built a second residence up there for a vacation home, so I was familiar with the neighborhood because I would go up on weekends. But, now that's 28 years ago, I built that home, so I was familiar, like I said, I was familiar with what's what. But you don't really know, look, everything looks great from the outside looking in until you actually dive in and see what the inner workings are like. Attend the village meetings, attend all of the, infrastructure meetings, and understand how the village tax and, just the inner workings of the village, right? But for the full year that we worked on the building, we did very, very little interaction with anyone. Like we really kept to ourselves. I kept to myself. Didn't really let too many people know what was going on. People wander in and look, and you try to explain to them, but they didn't get it. So it was like, then one day we opened. And then people were like curious, like they're looking like, what the hell's going on here? They saw a lot of work going on, but they didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden, like I said, we opened with 7-barrel system, small system. The bar wasn't even built yet. We had a little tasting room. I don't think it was 10 by 10. We had a kegerator in there with 2 taps on it. Brady's Bay, cream ale, an outrage IPA. Imagine you come out of the gate with a West Coast IPA. 7.3 was the ABV on that. These people, they're drinking Coors Light. The line was around the corner. We sold more beer in the first week. We sold out of every drop that we made. I said, wow, we're onto something. In 3-ounce glasses and growlers to go, right? Back in 2009. I said, holy shit, we're onto something. And we continued that model. We brewed, we sold. We brewed, we sold at a tasting room while we were working on the bar. We literally one night, we put a sign on the tasting room and said, bar open. We never told anyone. And all of a sudden people are starting a beautiful bar we built, 12 taps, and people start, holy shit. Like, so, and it just grassroots, it just grew, word of mouth grew, and people came. Look, I still know people that travel all over the country for beer. Back then it was the same. We would get people from Connecticut because we're close. Vermont, they would come. Wow, we just heard your new brewery opened up. It was much rare back then than it is now. Now, like, there's a brewery opening up every 3 days, or it's just like, oh yeah, that's old hat. There's a brewery over here. There's a brewery over here. Not to downplay it, by any means, right? It's still great. It's a great accomplishment, and I wish every single one of them the best of luck when they open it. But back then, it was like, wow, like if you were opening up a brewery, you were all of a sudden on a map. You saw yourself on a map as a player. And now all of a sudden 12 years go by, going on 13 years. It's like, holy shit, I'm like the veteran. Like, people are like, I've been doing this a long time, it seems like. And then the 5 or 6 years before that in the industry, like, touching almost 20 years already, right?
How long do you want to do this for, Ken?
Do it I'll continue doing it as long as I still have the passion for it. When I wake up in the morning and I don't realize, look, there's days, and look, the last 2 years have been
challenging for us all.
Horrific. It's been horrific for everybody, man. My friends in the industry, everyone's challenged right now. It's no individual. We're all dealing with it. But, I look at, I had a little sign in the first office that we put up, right? And it said, we make beer for a living. When I look at that, if I look at that and I just put my head down and I go, that doesn't mean anything to me anymore, that's when I'll stop, because at the end of the day, as bad as it gets, we're still doing something, and at least I'm doing something that I still have a passion for. And that's the driver here. That's what drives me.
I love that. And one of the things you said the first time we spoke, or when we recently spoke, was you ask yourself, how can I make a difference? Mm-hmm. So looking at how long you've been in the industry, how do you want to make a difference moving forward?
Hey, look, I think at the end of the day, what you leave behind, for me, it would be the difference. When it's all said and done, and what kind of legacy do I leave behind? Whether it's in the drywall industry, beer industry, whatever industry it is, was he a good dude? Was he authentic? Was he an honest, hardworking guy and made great beer? Did those things. Those are the most important things, I think, when it comes down to it. I enjoy now, at Crossroads, in the production facility, we have the opportunity of doing a lot of contract brewing for other breweries, up and coming breweries. So for me, what's great is that most of them are young guys getting into the industry for the first time. And I really enjoy looking at it from their perspective and what they're going through, and adding some helpful, not all my secrets, but insights and how can I help them, if they're having challenges, but to actually see the industry through their eyes now, how it's transformed and what they're going through. Again, that's a whole nother learning experience. So I get to watch that as well. And, these guys come in our brewery all the time. We contract brew them. They're always milling around. They're always out there. They're always asking questions. And you can see when they're frustrated with the industry or they're not. And, because we're all fighting the same battles out there every day, all the breweries, So that's kind of cool to see it from their perspective. I enjoy that. I actually do. I really do.
And I'm sure they enjoy the conversation, what they learned from you as well.
Well, let's hope so. They never actually told me, but like I said, I got to hold back some of the secrets. You can't give them all the secrets, But look, it's the same. It's the same thing. You got to grind, man. Nothing happens overnight. If you think that you're going to get into any business and it's going to happen overnight, it's just not. You got. It goes back to what I said earlier. You got to show up. You got to show up every day. You got to be consistent. You got to be consistent every day. You got to stay positive every day, because there's enough of the opposites out there that'll drag you down, and you gotta just keep your head up. And I think the people who persevere through this whole pandemic are the ones that are going to do very, very well in the next couple of years. The ones who unfortunately didn't, for whatever reasons, faces a whole nother set of challenges. But you got to be able to be creative and innovative and make quick decisions. And some people can't do that, but
there are a lot of skills necessary for survival, and you've given so much great insight today, and just your upbeat personality and show up philosophy and get the work done. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, you have to do that, right? Look, we're all fighting our own battles, right? It's hard enough. I always tell everybody, I go, look, it's easy to be miserable, man. Try being happy 5 days a week. That's hard. If you can do that, you're doing something good, And then at the end of the day, if you can lift up a pint of beer and enjoy it, it don't get much better. It's not the worst thing in the world.
It's not the worst thing in the world. And with that, Ken, we're going to sign off now. I'm really looking forward to sharing a pint with you before too long. Thanks for sharing your story today and just hanging out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time as always. And I'm leaning towards seeing you in St. Louis. So I think I'm hopeful for that. I'm going to be looking forward to that, and seeing some other people that we both have mutual.
I think we're craving a little more face-to-face interaction. So I can't wait to see you in Missouri.
Yeah, man. I love it. You take care, and I'll talk to you soon, Andrew.
Cheers.
Thanks, brother.